In the bustling city of New York, where ambition often overshadowed morality, two women stood out in the competitive world of corporate law. Their names were Karoline Leavitt and Jasmine Crockett. Both had risen quickly through the ranks at Hartman and Greer, one of the most prestigious law firms in the country. Known for its high-stakes cases and cutthroat environment, the firm was a breeding ground for talent, but also for rivalry. Karoline Leavitt was known as the strategist. She had an uncanny ability to read people and situations, often predicting outcomes before they unfolded. Her colleagues admired her sharp mind but sometimes found her cold and calculating. Despite this, there was no denying her brilliance. Whether it was drafting airtight contracts or dismantling opposing arguments in court, Karoline always seemed 3 steps ahead of everyone else. People whispered that she could turn any situation to her advantage, but few dared to cross her path. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, was the charmer. With her dazzling smile and magnetic personality, she could win over clients and colleagues alike. Her presentations were polished, her speeches persuasive, and her confidence unshakable. Where Karoline relied on logic and precision, Jasmine thrived on emotion and connection. Clients loved working with her because she made them feel heard and valued. Colleagues respected her ability to navigate even the trickiest negotiations with grace and poise. Though they worked in the same firm, their paths rarely crossed directly until now. A promotion was up for grabs, a partnership position that would not only secure their future within Hartman and Greer, but also cement their legacy in the legal community. It was a dream both women had been chasing for years, and neither was willing to let the other take it without a fight. The tension between them began simmering when they were assigned to co-lead a high-profile case involving a multi-million-dollar merger. At first glance, the assignment seemed like an opportunity for collaboration, a chance to showcase their combined strengths. But beneath the surface, it became clear that this was more than just another case. It was a battleground where only one could emerge victorious. As the weeks went by, the pressure mounted. Late-night strategy sessions turned into heated debates. Deadlines loomed large and tempers flared. Jasmine took charge of client relations, ensuring that stakeholders felt confident about the merger. She dazzled them with her presentations, painting a picture of growth and prosperity. Her optimism was infectious, and many began to see her as the face of the project. Meanwhile, Karoline focused on dissecting the legal intricacies of the deal. She pored over documents, searching for loopholes and vulnerabilities. While Jasmine's approach leaned toward creativity and persuasion, Karoline's was rooted in meticulous analysis and preparation. She left nothing to chance, double-checking every detail and anticipating potential challenges. To her, the case wasn't just about winning, it was about doing so without leaving room for error. Their differing styles soon led to clashes. Jasmine accused Karoline of being overly rigid and dismissive of creative solutions. "You're so focused on finding problems," Jasmine once snapped during a meeting, "that you forget we're here to solve them." Karoline shot back, criticizing Jasmine's tendency to prioritize appearances over substance. "Your charm might impress the clients," she retorted, "but it won't hold up in court if we miss something critical." Despite their disagreements, they managed to maintain a fragile truce for a while. That changed during a pivotal meeting with the senior partners. The board had gathered to review progress on the merger, and both women knew this was their moment to shine. Jasmine spoke first, delivering a flawless presentation that highlighted the benefits of the deal. She exuded confidence, addressing questions with ease and assuring everyone that all bases were covered. When it was Karoline's turn, she didn't mince words. With calm precision, she addressed the board, pointing out flaws in Jasmine's strategy. She presented evidence of risks that Jasmine had overlooked, exposing gaps in her counterpart's plan. The room fell silent as Karoline methodically dismantled Jasmine's narrative, leaving her visibly shaken. For the first time, the cracks in their partnership were laid bare for everyone to see. But this confrontation was only the beginning. What happened next would change the course of both their careers and lives forever. As the stakes grew higher, so did the intensity of their rivalry. Each woman believed she was fighting for justice, though their definitions of the word couldn't have been more different. Karoline saw herself as a guardian of truth, determined to protect the firm from costly mistakes. Jasmine viewed herself as a visionary, capable of turning challenges into opportunities. Outside the office, their personal lives reflected the strain of their professional conflict. Jasmine spent sleepless nights replaying meetings in her head, wondering how she could regain control of the situation. Friends noticed the change in her demeanor. The once confident lawyer now seemed unsure of herself. Meanwhile, Karoline appeared untouchable, her reputation growing stronger with each passing day. Yet those closest to her detected a hint of unease beneath her composed exterior. Winning came at a cost, and Karoline couldn't shake the feeling that she might be losing something important along the way. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. Neither woman realized just how far-reaching the consequences of their actions would be, or how much they would ultimately learn about themselves in the process. Little did they know, the real battle wasn't against each other. It was against their own fears, doubts, and desires. And as events unfolded, both Karoline and Jasmine would discover that victory isn't always what it seems. Sometimes the hardest lessons come not from triumph, but from failure. And the courage to rise, again afterward. The pressure inside Hartman and Greer's sleek, glass-walled conference room was palpable. Karoline Leavitt and Jasmine Crockett sat across from each other, surrounded by stacks of files, laptops glowing with spreadsheets, and whiteboards scribbled with notes. The high-profile merger case had become their battleground, and every late-night meeting felt like another round in an endless boxing match. Both women were exhausted, but neither showed it. They couldn't afford to. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against the table as she tried to break the silence. "I think we're overcomplicating things," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "We've got the clients on board, the numbers look solid, and everything is moving forward. Why are we still nitpicking?" Karoline didn't even glance up from the document she was reviewing. Without missing a beat, she replied, "Because nitpicking is what keeps us from getting blindsided later. If you'd bothered to read this clause properly," she tapped the paper sharply, "you'd see that there's a loophole here big enough to drive a truck through." Jasmine sighed, running a hand through her hair. She hated these moments. Hated how Karoline always seemed to find fault, no matter how well things appeared to be going. "Look," she began, trying to keep her tone light, "I'm not saying we ignore potential issues, but sometimes you have to trust the process. We can't predict every single problem before it happens. And sometimes you need to stop relying on blind optimism." Karoline shot back, finally looking up. Her piercing gaze locked onto Jasmine, who shifted uncomfortably under the weight of it. "This isn't about trusting the process, it's about making sure the process doesn't fall apart when someone starts asking tough questions." Their arguments had become routine, almost predictable. Yet, beneath the surface, something darker simmered. What started as professional disagreements now carried an edge of personal animosity. Each woman saw the other as standing in the way of her success. For Jasmine, Karoline represented everything she despised about the legal world: cold efficiency, ruthless pragmatism, and a complete lack of empathy. For Karoline, Jasmine embodied all the qualities she believed made lawyers reckless: impulsiveness, misplaced confidence, and a dangerous reliance on charm over substance. Things reached a boiling point during one particularly tense evening. The two had been working nonstop for hours, poring over documents and debating strategies. Tempers flared as deadlines loomed closer, and fatigue clouded their judgment. When Jasmine suggested skipping a detailed review of certain financial disclosures because they seemed fine based on preliminary reports, Karoline lost her composure. "You call this fine?" Karoline slammed a folder onto the table, startling Jasmine. Inside were pages highlighting inconsistencies in the financial data, details Jasmine had overlooked in her haste to move forward. "Do you realize what happens if these discrepancies come out after the deal is signed? It's not just your reputation on the line, it's the entire firm's." Jasmine bristled at the accusation. "Are you seriously implying I don't care about the firm, that I'd risk everything just to save time?" She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Maybe if you stopped obsessing over every tiny detail, we could actually get somewhere. And maybe if you stopped rushing into things without thinking them through, we wouldn't be in this mess. Karoline shot back, her voice rising. For a moment, neither spoke, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Jasmine grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "We'll talk tomorrow," she muttered, refusing to meet Karoline's eyes. As the door clicked shut behind her, Karoline sank into her chair, rubbing her temples. She knew they were both too stubborn to back down, and the clock was ticking. If they didn't resolve their differences soon, the entire project and their careers could collapse. The next day brought little relief. A crucial meeting with senior partners was scheduled, and both women knew it would be a make-or-break moment. They arrived early, preparing separately in adjacent offices. Jasmine rehearsed her presentation, pacing back and forth as she fine-tuned her delivery. Confidence was key, she reminded herself. She needed to reassure the partners that the merger was a safe bet, despite any lingering concerns. Karoline, meanwhile, spent the morning double-checking her findings. She wasn't just looking for weaknesses in Jasmine's plan. She was building a case. Every discrepancy, every oversight, every questionable assumption was meticulously documented. By the time she walked into the conference room, she carried a folder filled with evidence designed to dismantle Jasmine's narrative. When the meeting began, Jasmine took the lead, speaking passionately about the opportunities the merger presented. She highlighted projections showing exponential growth, praised the synergy between the companies, and assured the partners that all risks had been mitigated. Her charisma shone brightly, and for a while, it seemed like she might win them over completely. Then it was Karoline's turn. She stood up slowly, her demeanor calm but commanding. Opening her folder, she began laying out her points one by one. With clinical precision, she pointed out flaws in Jasmine's analysis, flaws that, until now, had gone unnoticed. She explained how certain liabilities hadn't been properly accounted for, how key stakeholders hadn't been consulted, and how regulatory hurdles remained unresolved. As Karoline spoke, the mood in the room shifted. The partners exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier enthusiasm fading. Jasmine watched helplessly as her carefully constructed argument unraveled before her eyes. She tried to interject, offering explanations and assurances, but Karoline's relentless logic left little room for rebuttal. Finally, Karoline delivered the knockout blow. In a quiet, measured tone, she said, "Jasmine may have done an excellent job selling the promise of this deal, but I wonder how many of you are aware that she failed to disclose critical information that puts the entire merger at risk." Kiwi. Words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. The room fell silent, the only sound being the faint hum of the air conditioning. Jasmine froze, her face pale. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, she realized the full extent of Karoline's strategy and the devastating impact it would have on her career. After the meeting, the fallout was immediate. Senior partners demanded an explanation, launching an internal investigation into Jasmine's handling of the case. Rumors spread quickly throughout the firm, painting her as careless and incompetent. Clients who had once trusted her began pulling their accounts, citing concerns about her judgment. Friends distanced themselves, unsure how to navigate the scandal, and Jasmine found herself increasingly isolated. For Karoline, victory came at a price. While she earned accolades from the board and secured her place as the firm's newest partner, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been lost along the way. Late at night, alone in her office, she replayed the events, in her mind wondering if there had been another way, a way to win without destroying someone else in the process. Meanwhile, Jasmine retreated to her apartment, grappling with the enormity of what had happened. Sleep eluded her as she replayed Karoline's words over and over again, searching for answers. How had she missed those details? Why hadn't she anticipated this outcome? And most importantly, how could she possibly recover from such a public humiliation? What neither woman realized at the time was that this moment would shape not only their careers but also their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The rivalry that had consumed them was far from over, but it was about to take a turn neither expected. The boardroom was silent except for the faint rustle of papers and the occasional scribble of a pen. Jasmine Crockett stood at the head of the table, her posture confident, but her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped up her presentation. She had poured her heart into this moment, rehearsing every word, perfecting every gesture. Her voice carried conviction as she painted a glowing picture of the merger, its potential for growth, its seamless integration, and the undeniable benefits it would bring to Hartman and Greer. As she concluded, the senior partners exchanged nods, their expressions approving. Jasmine allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. For a fleeting moment, she believed she had won them over completely. But then, Karoline Leavitt rose from her seat. Karoline moved with deliberate calm, her presence commanding attention without effort. She placed a folder on the table and opened it, revealing pages filled with annotated documents, highlighted, sections and charts illustrating discrepancies in the financial data. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Anticipation hung heavy in the air. Everyone leaned forward, sensing that what was about to unfold would be significant. "Thank you, Jasmine, for your insightful overview," Karoline began, her tone polite but firm. "However, I'd like to address some critical aspects of this deal that require further scrutiny." With those words, she launched into her analysis, dismantling Jasmine's narrative piece by piece. Each point she raised was sharp, precise, and impossible to ignore. She pointed out overlooked liabilities, flagged regulatory hurdles, and questioned the validity of certain projections. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that Jasmine's plan wasn't as foolproof as it seemed. Jasmine listened in stunned silence, her confidence crumbling with every sentence. She tried to interject, offering explanations and assurances, but Karoline's arguments were unrelenting. Every time Jasmine attempted to defend herself, Karoline countered with irrefutable evidence. It was as if she had anticipated every possible rebuttal, leaving no room for escape. Finally, Karoline delivered the line that would echo through the halls of Hartman and Greer for years to come. In a quiet, measured voice, she said, "Jasmine may have convinced us of the promise of this deal, but I wonder how many of you are aware that she failed to disclose the undisclosed liabilities that could cost us twice what we stand to gain." The room erupted into murmurs. Shocked faces turned toward Jasmine, who stood frozen, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The weight of Karoline's words pressed down on her like a ton of bricks. She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Her mind raced, searching for something, anything to salvage the situation. But it was too late. The damage had been done. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. Senior partners wasted no time launching an internal investigation into Jasmine's handling of the case. Emails were reviewed, phone calls scrutinized, and documents re-examined. What they found only confirmed Karoline's accusations. Critical information had indeed been overlooked or omitted. The oversight wasn't malicious, it stemmed from a combination of haste, misplaced confidence, and perhaps a touch of negligence. But the consequences were severe nonetheless. Rumors spread like wildfire throughout the firm. Whispers of Jasmine's failure reached every corner, tarnishing her reputation almost overnight. Clients who had once trusted her began pulling their accounts, citing concerns about her judgment. Colleagues who had admired her charisma now viewed her with suspicion, questioning whether her charm had blinded them to her flaws. Even friends distanced themselves, unsure how to navigate the scandal or unwilling to associate with someone whose career was in freefall. For Jasmine, the emotional toll was crushing. She spent sleepless nights replaying the meeting in her mind, dissecting every detail of Karoline's attack. How had she missed those liabilities? Why hadn't she double-checked the disclosures? And why, despite all her preparation, had she been so thoroughly outmaneuvered? Self-doubt consumed her, gnawing at her confidence and leaving her feeling hollow. Her once bright future now felt bleak. Promotions and opportunities that had seemed within reach suddenly vanished. Invitations to high-profile meetings dried up, replaced by awkward silences in hallways and sympathetic glances from acquaintances. Jasmine began avoiding social events, unable to face the pity, or worse, the judgment, of her peers. Her apartment became her refuge, a place where she could hide from the world and try to make sense of what had happened. Meanwhile, Karoline basked in the glow of her victory. The board praised her diligence and foresight, hailing her as the savior of the firm. Her promotion to partner was announced shortly after the meeting, cementing her status as one of Hartman and Greer's most valuable assets. Colleagues congratulated her, though many did so with a hint of unease. There was no denying her brilliance, but her methods left a bitter taste in some mouths. People whispered about her ruthlessness, wondering whether winning at any cost was truly worth it. Karoline tried to push aside the nagging guilt that crept into her thoughts late at night. She told herself that she had done what needed to be done, that exposing Jasmine's mistakes was better for the firm in the long run. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the human cost of her actions. Images of Jasmine's shocked expression haunted her dreams, reminding her of the devastation she had wrought. At work, she maintained her composed exterior, but inside she felt increasingly isolated. Her colleagues respected her but kept their distance, wary of crossing paths with someone so calculating. Despite their vastly different trajectories, both women grappled with the aftermath of that fateful day. For Jasmine, it was a journey of self-reflection and survival. She realized that her downfall wasn't just about missing details, it was about losing sight of the bigger picture. Her reliance on charm and optimism had blinded her to potential pitfalls, and her failure to collaborate effectively with Karoline had sealed her fate. Yet even in her darkest moments, she refused to give up. She began seeking advice from mentors outside the firm, determined to learn from her mistakes and rebuild her career. For Karoline, the victory brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she had achieved everything she had worked for: recognition, respect, and a coveted partnership position. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was missing. Winning had come at the expense of another person's dreams, and the loneliness that accompanied her success weighed heavily on her. She started questioning whether her relentless pursuit of perfection was sustainable or even desirable. As weeks turned into months, the rivalry between Karoline and Jasmine faded from public view, reduced to hushed conversations and speculative glances. But privately, both women continued to wrestle with the consequences of their actions. They had entered the merger case as competitors, each vying for dominance. Now, they emerged changed, scarred by their experiences but also poised for growth. Jasmine began exploring new avenues, considering fields outside corporate law where she could use her skills to make a difference. She volunteered at legal clinics, helping underprivileged individuals navigate complex systems. The work was humbling but rewarding, giving her a renewed sense of purpose. Slowly, she rebuilt her confidence, learning to balance her natural optimism with a newfound appreciation for detail and caution. Karoline, meanwhile, sought to soften her image. She initiated discussions with colleagues about fostering a more collaborative culture within the firm, emphasizing the importance of teamwork over individual achievement. She also made an effort to mentor younger lawyers, sharing her knowledge while encouraging them to develop their own unique styles. Though change didn't happen overnight, she hoped that these small steps would help repair the bridges she had burned. Neither woman knew it at the time, but their paths were destined to cross again. When they did, it wouldn't be as rivals, but as two individuals who had learned painful lessons about ambition, integrity, and the true meaning of success. For now, however, they remained focused on their separate journeys, navigating the aftermath of a single sentence that had shattered one career and elevated another. Months had passed since the fateful meeting that changed everything for Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt. The firm of Hartman and Greer moved on, as firms always do, but the scars left by that day lingered, both in the corridors of the office and in the lives of the two women at its center. For Jasmine, life outside the spotlight was a mix of pain, reflection, and quiet determination. For Karoline, success came wrapped in isolation, leaving her to wonder if victory truly tasted as sweet as she'd imagined. Jasmine's world had shrunk dramatically. Once a rising star whose name echoed through boardrooms, she now found herself relegated to the shadows. Her once busy schedule of meetings and client calls had dwindled to near silence. Emails went unanswered, invitations stopped arriving, and even casual greetings in the hallway felt forced or non-existent. It was as though she had become invisible, a ghost haunting the very place where she'd once thrived. At first, Jasmine struggled to cope with the loss. She spent hours staring at her computer screen, paralyzed by self-doubt. Was she really as incompetent as everyone seemed to think? Had her confidence been misplaced all along? Nights were the hardest. Alone in her apartment, she replayed Karoline's words over and over again, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. Sleep eluded her, replaced by restless tossing and turning as her mind churned with questions she couldn't answer. But, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift inside her. One evening, while scrolling aimlessly through social media, Jasmine stumbled upon a post from an old colleague who had left corporate law to work in public service. The post described how fulfilling it was to help people navigate legal challenges they couldn't face alone. Something about those words struck a chord deep within Jasmine. Maybe this wasn't the end of her career. It could be the beginning of something new. The next morning, Jasmine made a decision. If the corporate world no longer wanted her, she would find a way to use her skills elsewhere. She reached out to former mentors and friends, asking for advice on transitioning into public interest law. To her surprise, many were eager to help. Some offered leads on open positions at nonprofit organizations. Others shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs. Their encouragement gave Jasmine the boost she needed to take the first step toward reinvention. She started small, volunteering at a local legal aid clinic during weekends. At first, it was intimidating. Gone were the polished presentations and high-stakes negotiations she was used to. Instead, she found herself sitting across from ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Single mothers fighting for custody of their children, immigrants seeking asylum, workers wrongfully denied. Wages. These cases didn't come with million-dollar price tags or glamorous boardroom settings, but they mattered deeply to the clients and, increasingly, to Jasmine herself. As she listened to their stories, Jasmine realized something profound. Her greatest strength wasn't her charm or her ability to dazzle clients. It was her capacity to connect with people, to understand their fears and hopes and translate them into actionable solutions. This realization ignited a spark within her, reigniting the passion for justice that had drawn her to law in the first place. For the first time in months, she felt alive again, not because she was winning awards or impressing executives, but because she was making a difference. While Jasmine rebuilt her life piece by piece, Karoline faced challenges of her own. On paper, she had achieved everything she'd ever wanted. As a newly minted partner at Hartman & Greer, she commanded respect, wielded influence, and enjoyed financial security. Yet behind closed doors, cracks began to show. The relentless drive that had propelled her to the top now felt like a weight, pressing down on her shoulders. Karoline's days were filled with long hours and endless responsibilities. She attended meetings, reviewed contracts, and advised junior associates, always maintaining the same air of calm authority. But beneath her composed exterior, doubts simmered. Winning against Jasmine had solidified her reputation as a formidable lawyer, but it had also earned her a label she hadn't anticipated: ruthless. Colleagues admired her intellect but kept their distance, wary of crossing someone so calculating. Clients trusted her expertise but sometimes questioned her motives, wondering if she prioritized results over relationships. Loneliness crept into Karoline's life unnoticed at first. She had always prided herself on being independent, someone who didn't need validation from others. But as weeks turned into months, the absence of meaningful connections began to wear on her. Late at night, when the office emptied and the city lights flickered beyond her window, she found herself reflecting on the choices that had brought her here. Had she sacrificed too much in pursuit of success? Was there a way to balance ambition with empathy? Determined to find answers, Karoline began experimenting with subtle changes in her approach. During team meetings, she made an effort to listen more and speak less, encouraging junior lawyers to share their ideas instead of dominating the conversation. When reviewing cases, she took time to explain her reasoning rather than simply issuing directives. These adjustments might have seemed minor, but they signaled a shift in her mindset, one that prioritized collaboration over competition. One afternoon, while mentoring a young associate named Rachel, Karoline received unexpected feedback. "You're really good at breaking things down," Rachel said hesitantly. "I mean, you make complicated stuff seem manageable. I just wish—" She trailed off, unsure whether to continue. "Wish what?" Karoline prompted gently. "I guess I wish you'd let us see more of who you are," Rachel admitted. "Not just the partner, but, you know, the person." The comment stayed with Karoline long after the meeting ended. For years, she had built walls around herself, believing that vulnerability was a weakness. Now she wondered if those walls had actually held her back, not just from forming genuine connections, but from becoming the kind of leader she truly wanted to be. Despite their vastly different circumstances, both women found themselves grappling with similar questions. What does it mean to succeed? And at what cost? Jasmine's journey taught her that true fulfillment comes not from accolades but from impact, the ability to change lives for the better. Karoline's introspection revealed that power isn't measured by titles or victories, but by the trust and respect one earns from others. Their paths remained separate for now, but neither woman realized how intertwined their futures would become. In the meantime, they continued navigating the aftermath of that pivotal moment, each searching for redemption in her own way. Jasmine discovered joy in serving those who needed her most, while Karoline worked to redefine what success looked like for herself and for those around her. As the seasons changed, so did they. The rivalry that had defined them was fading, replaced by a quiet evolution. They had entered this chapter as adversaries, shaped by ambition and pride. But as they emerged on the other side, they carried lessons that would guide them forward. Resilience, humility, and the understanding that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. Years had passed since the dramatic events that altered the trajectories of Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt. Life, as it often does, had moved forward, reshaping their worlds in ways neither could have predicted. The scars of their rivalry still lingered, but time had softened their edges, allowing both women to grow into versions of themselves they barely recognized from those tense days at Hartman and Greer. Jasmine's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. After leaving corporate law behind, she dedicated herself to public service with a fervor that surprised even her closest friends. Her work at the legal aid clinic blossomed into a full-fledged practice focused on advocating for marginalized communities. She represented clients who couldn't afford high-powered attorneys, people facing eviction, discrimination, or unjust treatment by the system. What started as weekend volunteering became her life's mission. Her new role required a different kind of strength than what she'd displayed in boardrooms. Instead of dazzling stakeholders with polished presentations, she now fought tooth and nail in courtrooms, armed with little more than determination and moral conviction. It wasn't glamorous work, and the pay was modest compared to her previous salary, but Jasmine found fulfillment she'd never known before. Every victory, no matter how small, felt monumental because it meant someone got a second chance, a lifeline when all seemed lost. Word of her dedication spread quickly within the community. Local newspapers wrote profiles about her, calling her a champion for the underdog. Clients praised her compassion and relentlessness, saying she made them feel seen and heard in ways they hadn't experienced before. For Jasmine, these accolades weren't about ego. They were reminders of why she'd chosen this path. Each success reinforced her belief that failure isn't final. It's an opportunity to pivot, to find purpose where you least expect it. But redemption didn't come without challenges. There were days when the weight of her cases overwhelmed her, when she questioned whether she was doing enough, fighting hard enough, making enough of a difference. Some nights, memories of her downfall crept back, whispering doubts in her ear. Would she ever fully escape the shadow of that fateful meeting? Could she truly rebuild her reputation after such a public fall? On those difficult days, Jasmine leaned on the support system she'd built over the years. Former colleagues who had once distanced themselves during her scandal reached out, offering encouragement and admiration for her resilience. Even some former clients from her corporate law days sent messages of gratitude, acknowledging the positive impact she'd had on their lives despite everything. These gestures reminded her that people aren't defined solely by their lowest moments. They're shaped by how they rise afterward. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt continued navigating her own journey of self-discovery. As a partner at Hartman & Greer, she remained a force to be reckoned with, respected for her sharp intellect and strategic brilliance. Yet, beneath the surface, she wrestled with questions about legacy and leadership. Winning against Jasmine had secured her place at the top, but it had also left her feeling hollow. The loneliness she'd felt in the aftermath of that victory lingered, prompting her to rethink what success truly meant. Karoline began advocating for change within the firm, not just in policies but in culture. She pushed for initiatives aimed at fostering collaboration rather than competition among associates. During team meetings, she encouraged open dialogue, inviting junior lawyers to voice their opinions and ideas. When disagreements arose, she listened instead of dismissing, striving to understand perspectives different from her own. Slowly, her efforts began to bear fruit. Colleagues who had once viewed her with wariness now approached her with trust and respect, seeing her not just as a formidable opponent but as a mentor and ally. Outside the office, Karoline sought balance in her personal life. She reconnected with old friends, joined a book club, and even took up painting, a hobby she'd abandoned in her youth. These activities brought her joy and reminded her that there was more to life than climbing ladders and crushing rivals. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to embrace vulnerability, sharing her fears and insecurities with those close to her. In doing so, she discovered that true strength lies not in invincibility, but in authenticity. Despite their separate paths, echoes of their shared history occasionally surfaced. At industry conferences and networking events, whispers of their infamous showdown still circulated. Some recounted the story with awe, marveling at Karoline's precision and Jasmine's resilience. Others used it as a cautionary tale, warning against letting ambition blind one to ethics and empathy. Neither woman paid much attention to these narratives anymore. They were too busy forging ahead, focusing on the present rather than dwelling on the past. Then came a moment neither expected, a chance encounter at a legal conference several years later. The event brought together professionals from various sectors of the legal field, including corporate law, public interest advocacy, and academia. Both Jasmine and Karoline were invited to speak on panels addressing the future of justice reform, a topic that bridged their respective worlds. They crossed paths in the crowded lobby of the hotel hosting the conference. At first, neither noticed the other amid the sea of suits and name tags. But then, Jasmine spotted Karoline standing near the coffee station, scrolling through her phone. Their eyes met briefly before both looked away, unsure how to react. After a pause, Jasmine approached cautiously. "Karoline," she said softly, breaking the silence. Her tone was neutral, neither hostile nor overly friendly. Karoline turned, startled but composed. "Jasmine," she replied, mirroring the same measured tone. An awkward silence followed, each woman weighing the unspoken history between them. Finally, Jasmine broke the tension with a small smile. "It's been a long time." "Yes, it has," Karoline agreed, her expression thoughtful. They stood there for a moment, neither sure where to begin. Then, almost simultaneously, they laughed nervously, the ice finally cracking. Over the next hour, they talked, hesitantly at first, then more openly. They discussed their careers, their struggles, and the lessons they'd learned along the way. Jasmine shared how her work in public service had given her a renewed sense of purpose, while Karoline admitted to grappling with guilt over the fallout of their rivalry. To her surprise, Jasmine nodded understandingly. "I won't lie, it hurt, Jasmine confessed. For a long time, I thought my career was over. But looking back, maybe I needed that wake-up call. You forced me to confront my weaknesses and figure out what really matters to me. Karoline exhaled sharply, visibly moved by Jasmine's words. I've thought about that day a lot, she admitted. I told myself I was protecting the firm, but I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if there was another way. A way to win, without destroying someone else's dreams. Jasmine placed a hand on Karoline's arm, surprising them both. Maybe we both needed to learn something, she said gently. You taught me to slow down, to pay attention to details. And maybe I reminded you that winning isn't everything. The conversation ended with a mutual acknowledgement of growth and change. Neither apologized outright. Words like sorry felt inadequate given the complexity of their shared history, but they parted ways with a newfound respect for one another. As they walked in opposite directions, both women reflected on how far they'd come since that fateful meeting. For Jasmine, the encounter was a reminder that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding peace with the past and moving forward with grace. For Karoline, it was validation that redemption is possible, even after causing pain. Together, though unbeknownst to them, their stories intertwined in ways that transcended rivalry. They had started as adversaries, driven by ambition and pride, but emerged as two women united by resilience, humility, and the courage to redefine success on their own terms. As the conference wound down and attendees dispersed, Jasmine and Karoline returned to their respective lives carrying lessons that would guide them for years to come. Their paths might never cross again, but the impact of their brief reunion lingered, a testament to the power of growth, forgiveness, and the human capacity to rise above even the most challenging chapters of life. The years continued to roll by, each bringing new challenges and triumphs for Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt. Their chance encounter at the legal conference marked a turning point, not just in their personal journeys but also in how they viewed themselves and each other. Though their lives remained largely separate, the ripple effects of that brief conversation echoed far beyond what either woman could have anticipated. For Jasmine, her work in public service became a beacon of hope, not only for her clients but also for aspiring lawyers seeking alternatives to the cutthroat world of corporate law. Her name began appearing in headlines again, this time as a symbol of resilience and reinvention. Legal journals profiled her transition from corporate powerhouse to community advocate, highlighting her ability to turn failure into fuel for success. Law students cited her story during debates about ethics and ambition, hailing her as proof that true fulfillment comes not from accolades, but from impact. Jasmine embraced her role as a mentor, speaking at universities and workshops across the country. She shared candid stories about her rise, fall, and rebirth, encouraging young professionals to define success on their own terms. It's easy to get caught up in titles and trophies, she often said during these talks. But real success is about making a difference, about leaving the world better than you found it. Her words resonated deeply with audiences who saw her not as a cautionary tale, but as an inspiration. Her practice grew steadily, attracting clients from all walks of life. Each case brought its own set of challenges, but Jasmine approached them with unwavering determination. Whether she was defending a single mother facing eviction or representing a group of factory workers fighting for fair wages, she poured her heart into every battle. And though victories were hard-won, they filled her with a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. Outside of work, Jasmine built a fulfilling personal life. She reconnected with old friends, joined local advocacy groups, and even started volunteering at a youth center teaching kids about their legal rights. These activities gave her joy and reminded her that meaningful connections are the foundation of happiness. For the first time in years, she felt whole, not defined by past mistakes but empowered by the lessons they had taught her. Karoline, too, underwent profound changes. As she continued advocating for cultural shifts within Hartman and Greer, her efforts began to bear fruit. The firm implemented programs aimed at fostering collaboration and inclusivity, creating an environment where junior lawyers felt valued and supported. Colleagues credited Karoline with spearheading these initiatives, praising her leadership style as thoughtful and compassionate. Slowly but surely, the label of ruthless faded, replaced by one of visionary. Beyond the office walls, Karoline explored hobbies and interests she'd neglected for years. Painting became her sanctuary, a place where she could express emotions without judgment. Her artwork reflected her inner journey, bold strokes juxtaposed with delicate details, chaos giving way to harmony. Friends noticed a softer side to her, one that balanced ambition with empathy. She laughed more, listened better, and opened herself up to experiences she'd once dismissed as frivolous. One evening, while attending a charity gala, Karoline found herself reflecting on her evolution. Surrounded by colleagues, clients, and friends, she realized how much her perspective had shifted. Success no longer meant climbing higher on the ladder. It meant building bridges, lifting others up, and leaving a legacy worth remembering. The weight of guilt she'd carried for so long finally lifted, replaced by a quiet pride in the person she had become. Though their paths rarely crossed after the conference, Jasmine and Karoline occasionally thought of each other. Neither woman knew exactly what the other was doing, but both carried the memory of their conversation as a reminder of growth and redemption. They had entered that meeting hall as strangers bound by rivalry. They left as two individuals united by shared humanity. Then came another unexpected twist, one neither could have foreseen. A major legal reform initiative was announced, aiming to address systemic inequities in the justice system. The project required collaboration between corporate firms, public interest advocates, and government agencies, a rare opportunity to bridge divides and create lasting change. To everyone's surprise, Jasmine and Karoline were invited to co-lead the effort. When the news reached them, both women hesitated. Could they truly work together after everything that had happened? Memories of their heated arguments and bitter rivalry resurfaced, casting doubt over the feasibility of such a partnership. Yet deep down, they both knew it was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. If they succeeded, they could make history, not just for themselves, but for countless others whose lives depended on a fairer system. Their initial meetings were awkward, filled with polite formalities and guarded exchanges. But as they delved deeper into the project, old habits gave way to mutual respect. Jasmine brought passion and grassroots insight, while Karoline contributed strategic acumen and institutional knowledge. Together they formed a dynamic duo, complementing each other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Challenges arose, as they always do in ambitious endeavors. Stakeholders clashed over priorities, resources were stretched thin, and deadlines loomed ominously. But Jasmine and Karoline faced these obstacles head-on, drawing strength from their shared commitment to the cause. Late-night brainstorming sessions turned into moments of genuine camaraderie, laughter breaking through tension like sunlight piercing clouds. As the initiative gained momentum, so did public interest. Media outlets covered their progress extensively, framing it as a testament to the power of collaboration. When asked about their partnership during interviews, Jasmine and Karoline spoke candidly about their past rivalry and subsequent reconciliation. "We didn't start out as allies," Jasmine admitted during one press conference. "But sometimes the hardest battles teach us the most important lessons." Karoline nodded, adding, "Success isn't about winning or losing, it's about finding ways to move forward together." This project is proof that even the most unlikely partnerships can lead to extraordinary outcomes. By the time the reform initiative launched, it had transformed not only policies, but also perceptions. It addressed critical issues like access to justice, equitable representation, and accountability within the legal system. Thousands of people benefited directly from its provisions, while countless others drew hope from the message it sent. Change is possible when we choose unity over division. For Jasmine and Karoline, the experience solidified their bond. What had begun as reluctant cooperation evolved into a genuine friendship, a testament to the healing power of time, humility, and shared purpose. They celebrated the initiative's success together, raising glasses in a toast that acknowledged not just their achievements but also their journeys. "To second chances," Jasmine said, smiling warmly. "And to learning from the past," Karoline added, clinking her glass against Jasmine's. As they parted ways after the celebration, both women felt a profound sense of closure. Their rivalry had shaped them, tested them, and ultimately strengthened them. They had emerged stronger, not despite their struggles, but because of them. Life had thrown curveballs, forcing them to adapt, grow, and redefine what it means to succeed. And in doing so, they had inspired others to do the same. Years later, when historians wrote about the landmark legal reforms of that era, they highlighted Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt not as adversaries, but as pioneers. Their story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the fiercest rivals can find common ground when guided by integrity, perseverance, and the belief that redemption is always within reach. And so, their legacy endured, not as a tale of destruction or defeat, but as a testament to the transformative power of resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to rise above.